Welcome back to the second act with DeAngelo, the space where grown adults come to reinvent, reflect, and rise into the version of themselves they were always meant to be. Today, we're having a conversation this country desperately needs to hear. My guest is someone who has turned compassion into a calling, service into a lifestyle, and healing into a national movement. He's known across the country as the kindness guru. Yes, a man who has walked into school shootings, natural disasters, and some of the most divided rooms in America, and still chooses kindness as his strategy for change. He's the author of the powerful new book called Make America Kind Again, a work that challenges leaders, parents, educators, and everyday people to put humanity over politics and empathy over ego. This isn't just a slogan, it's a blueprint for how we rebuild community in a time when the country feels more fractured than ever.
Mm.
Marcus Knight has spent over a decade servicing schools, first responders, corporations, and families. He's teaching young people how to think critically and how to lead with heart and how to disagree without dehumanizing each other. And he's doing it with a level of courage and clarity that feels rare in 2026. Today, we're going to talk about kindness, not the soft, surface level kind, but the kind that requires accountability, emotional intelligence, and a real grown folk maturity. So settle in. This is a conversation about healing, leadership, and the future of who we are as a country. Marcus Knight, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. We just want to infect the world with kindness. We want to infect them with positivity and the true meaning of the word, which is underviewed as weak and cute, but is really probably one of the most powerful things that we could ever do if we can conquer it.
Well, that's awesome. I'm happy that you're here today, and we're going to get into this and talk about this great book in the back here. And we're going to make sure that everyone knows where to get in the end. But I want to start with this question, if you don't mind. Marcus, before you became known as the kindness guru, what moment or experience awakened this mission inside you?
Well, I can say that during the pandemic, um, was a beginning, and truly having these major companies and corporations, uh, from local all the way to Unilever, Fortune 100 global company, and everything in between. This was the beginning, but what truly took it to another level is only just a couple years ago. Um, I can think of the anniversary of a time when I actually had heart issues, and I found myself unalive. I found myself um, where my heart stopped, and I was whatever afterlife there is. I was there to meet it, and it just so happens that I was being interviewed, and the interviewer actually from the radio station is actually in Texas. The radio station actually called the police and ambulance firefighters um, from Texas here in New York to where they came in and actually revived me. Um, I spent about 4 months in the hospital, but after that time, I'm not a writer, mind you. But after that time, I began to write. And it was pretty much 9 months straight. We're talking 10 hours, 12 hours on a good day, waking up at 4 something in the morning because I have an amazing thought, 15, 16 hours in that day. Um, but I guess, everybody that I've ever heard or read about that had a near death experience always comes back with this new vision of life. Well, for me, it's a more metamorphosis. I came back one needing to tell a story that I didn't even know needed to be told. I was doing it selfishly for my own children and to meet a need that I saw locally. Little did I know that the entire United States and the planet really was missing this tool all along.
Hmm. So your book opens up a powerful call to action for leaders, parents, educators, and faith communities. What was the emotional or political climate that pushed you to write this?
Realizing that I'm pretty interactive with my kids, and I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I'm very proud of my young man who got countless scholarship opportunities um, from Princeton to Harvard, and again many more. But as intelligent as he is, when I asked about his knowledge about community affairs, what's happening in our city, state, much less within the country, and the things that are on the news every single day, he had no answers. And so I realized that my son is about to be eligible to vote, to cast a vote for the leader of the next, next leader of the free world, the United States of America, and then researching to see that there's 4 million graduates every single year, seniors who will be voting, cast a vote, or at least eligible to vote. In most cases, do not exercise that right to vote. And I have to say that even the ones that are voting are doing so um, according to the house they live, meaning whatever mom and dad has been saying, whatever they're hearing around a dinner table, and um, family, even friends, which is so limited because they're conscious about school and graduating and becoming 18 and getting their license and girlfriend, boyfriends and part-time job. There's so many things that it's been overlooked. This is something that should have been in place 100 years ago, much less 50 years ago, as a guide to empower and educate, to inform these young people who are about to have an ultimate amazing opportunity to wear what they think matters within the country, but it's never been presented to them before as any type of importance enough to ensure that they knew what was going on. That is before this book.
Okay. And you challenge America to put people over politics. Why do you think that that message is so hard for our country to embrace right now?
Well, what we see today is well, it reminds me of the playground. It reminds me very much of watching kids um, have teams and play against one another, and then uh, somebody does something that the other team disagrees with, and all of a sudden it explodes into this fight to where um, you know uh, as far as kids go, it could be as small an issue as you looked at me funny, or you said something and I misheard it. That's not what I said, and that's enough. Well, I see politics as big kids, and I see that it doesn't take much, since there's so much to agree to disagree about, that for one to get upset with the other, and to where we the party becomes all that life is about instead of we the people. I see the decisions that are being made not being for we the people, but we the party. If you've got millions of people who are counting on you to make a decision, pass a law, a bill, uh, to move something that is going to help sustain or secure the country. And again, millions of people, financially, medically, emotionally, in some facet, but you have party members who are disagreeing And with that disagreement, the 2 or 4 members of the political realm govern the millions who are counting on them to agree. So um, I've said it in many occasions. It has to be come back to, this powerful statement: "We the people outweigh we the party."
So the book was audited, I believe, for political bias and ended up being placed in the public library system as a political science book, and even recognized as a living history book. What did that validation mean to you? And another question I have on top of that is, how did you put together this book? Because, we all have unconscious biases to lean towards one direction or the other. So, how did you go through the process of separating your own beliefs and putting together both sides in this book?
Okay. Um, well, question one: when I got the book published, I we started the process as far as getting it accepted into the library system. Well, it just so happened to be during the election time, and so there's a rule which I didn't know about, and or a law that I was informed about, which said you weren't able um, to bring political uh, biased or one-sided materials of any kind within 100 yards of a pole. Well, guess what? The library was the pole. So, in which I had a table announcing that my book is being published and sponsored by this library. So, in which case, I was approached by members of Democratic and Republican Party to say there's no way that this is impartial. Um, and the head of the library warned me that I may have to take it down. Well, we presented the book to both parties, and it seemed a little reluctant with the comments that came back to say, okay, and surprised that yes, it is fair and impartial. There isn't a political bias to this, which leads to that second question: how did I do this? Well, I needed to do this because basically, when you only know one side of a story, we tend to mistake that for a whole truth when it isn't. It's one side. And the whole point in figuring out there's 4 million kids graduating, and we want to increase that number. It's just by informing them, it's by educating them on not what to think, but how to think for themselves. Right. And so the only way to do that, I felt, was to be apolitical, which was be to say, I'm not it's not my opinion. I'm going to research and source just the facts. So in a specific subject, this is what um, the issue is, and this is what one side believes. And with the same subject on the other side, this is what the opposing side believes and why. But I want to give weight to both sides. I almost want to I almost want to convince both sides that they're right. I want to come from both angles, as if they're arguing for each other, so that hopefully in the end, even with controversial issues, you won't even see the difference.
So, why do you believe kindness is not just a moral value, but a strategy for healing in such a divided nation right now?
Um, it's about expanding your perspective. It's about um, intellectual courage. It's about learning um, to know what you don't know.
Wow.
Because again, just like in the beginning, we spoke about to to think and or believe of what you know is only it's not a whole truth because it's just what you know. So
Got
that's
you.
exactly what that means.
So you're dealing with, so basically, if someone is getting this book, it's like they're forcing themselves to understand the other side's perspective, right?
Absolutely.
Because we're so passionate about what we believe that, we spend, 90% listening to media, listening to news, listening to influencers, and listening to people who already validate our feelings.
That's
But your
right.
book, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you've done the work to provide both sides so that we can understand why the opposition or the other side feels the way they do, so that we can have a full 360 of the issue, right?
Absolutely. And in most cases, when you really digest the other side, it has its merit and it has its points that if you truly have an open mind, you have to even acknowledge the other side.
Mm,
And, which leads me to even the cover. The cover of this book is designed in uh with the same um impact, if you will, as the United States passport. And the reason doing so is because the passport is your ticket as you travel, right? That's how you that's how you get in and out. But a passport is worth nothing unless you decide to travel. If you're stationary, if you never go anywhere, you don't even need it. Well, the same is with this book. If you're willing to travel outside of the mindset of your own,
mhm.
if you're willing to open this book to a difference within your mind, but once again, you have to be willing to travel outside of your own country or your own mind
Your own
in order
thinking.
for it to be effective. Absolutely.
Right. So an issue like, for example, let's say um the Israel, and Gaza and all that stuff, stuff that's happening on that side of the world where we're so the people are divided, it's 50-50 on who you're for. It's like, let's say if you're for Israel, right? Then, you know, if you're reading this book, you're going to understand why the opposition feels the way they do
Yes.
against Israel, so you could understand what are the pain points on both sides, right? So you can have a more
Yes.
informed conversation. So let me ask you a question, when it comes to like kids, then, because I mean, I know you talk a lot about this book is for adults and teenagers. You reference your child as well. Um, they're dealing with social media. They get their information quick, fast, don't have to go do any research, and they probably don't. Many of them probably don't, right? Peer pressure and political noise, as you can see, is rampant right now. How
Mhm.
do you get them to care about seeing the other side
Well,
of point of information?
primarily I mean, this book is for high school and college age and above, just because of the serious nature of the book. Um, I think, I think starting early though, as early as elementary, you know, just about, about bullying and getting along and agreeing to disagree and respect is important because whatever perspective they have as children, they'll carry as teens and into their adulthood. So also stating as closed-minded as you are, in the beginning, it only increases and get tighter as you get older. But those what I hope to happen is to open up the mind or um as to how this affects them. So the reason why kids today, teenagers, um, don't take serious a lot of the issues that state of the country, I mean, the news, just the news period. How many kids, that would be an interesting thing. How many teenagers actually watch the news? I would imagine that it would be rather low. But to sit with them and to digest these issues. Now, these issues within the book were researched uh, to know out of the entire Earth how many people or what are the top 50 questions that people have about the United States and issues in the United States. That's how we found out and got the book in the first place, and then internationally as well. And so we know that worldwide the world is asking these questions. Now the so that's one thing. The next thing is to identify to these young adults how it affected their parents and their state of being right now. And then to go further, how will it affect them? Because this is where, and if something doesn't affect you, in most cases, people don't even, they can take it or leave it. And in most
Right.
cases, with the business of life, we're going to leave it. But
Hmm.
now let's take it to another level. How does it affect your parents? How does it affect you right now and in your future? But then how is this going to affect your children? When you have kids, what's the state of the earth, the planet, the laws, regulations, rules, abuses, good and bad? What kind of a world are they going to be? Are you bringing them into that they don't have a choice because they're innocent, but they're going to
Hmm.
inherit whatever? So, um, the key is to hold this book up and hold it as a mirror that they can see themselves and their future and how it's affected by the issues that are in this book.
Hmm. You've led monthly workshops at the largest library in Westchester and teaching students how to think critically about what's happening in the country. And you already kind of answered this question I was going to ask you later about how do you get them to think critically. But what have you seen as the response from these experiences you've had, these workshops you've been doing? What has been some of the positive response you've been seeing?
Well, the most rewarding thing for me has been um, kind of, I call it the light bulb. And that is, there's so many issues in the book. I let them choose. I let them look through the book, and that way I know I'm hitting a bullseye. But I let them choose one of the ones that is interesting to them. And then I already know, I know what they don't know, but they don't know what they don't know. So we're back to the light bulb. When I see the light bulb go on, and I can argue a point to where most of them are opposed, but when I can argue a point to make them at least understand why the other side is feeling and are saying what they're saying, and that they have a right to. They absolutely have a right to feel and or think how they feel and think, regardless of whatever the mass or majority or one or the masses feel against it. So, and then to put it
So is
back
it like
on them,
teaching them
if it
how
were
to?
you.
Mhm. So it's like you're teaching them how to disagree without dehumanizing the other side or the other people in the process, right? Or each other
Acknowledging
rather.
and acknowledging and respecting, regardless of I've served my country in the military, and everyone else who has signed and held up their head and been sworn in to uphold the Constitution, to protect and serve this country and those people who within the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those people did so um, to pay a price so that the freedom of speech and opinion would prevail. And for some reason, we keep going one step forward, two steps back, and infringing on that very right because somebody thinks different than the next person.
So do you think we're spending too much time trying to be right than trying to, find compromise? Because we know some of these issues, I know that you've outlaid in the book, For example, let's say LGBT, it's a divided issue in the country, and or any, immigration is a divided issue right now in the country. You
Mm,
know, you're not going to change certain people's strong beliefs, based on their experience and what they've been impacted. But I think the mission is to be able to have a conversation with the opposed with kindness. I mean, if you're looking at what's happening right now in the Congress, you're seeing these arguments. It's like little kids. You've mentioned it before. It's like, I can't believe what we're seeing, right? We're so divided, and there's no humility in conversation. So I think your book is, from what I read, it's given us both sides of the issue. But I feel like the larger root issue to get to changing the mind frame of people, because we're always going to have topics that we're going to be divided on. That's just the way it is, right? From the
right.
beginning of Earth to now into present, that's always going to be present. But if I were to ask you, what does making America kind again look like in action, not just as a slogan, but as a lifestyle? You
Mhm.
know, what would you say? Like, how do you see that? What would you like to see differently?
Um, Once again, just common courtesy and decency, respect. You could say this is old school, but perhaps perhaps we need to bring back some old school to the new school, but because there's some common decency uh, things that were applicable and just taken for granted. Um, if you recall being a teenager, there were certain things that you just would never think about doing or saying. It just there's such thing as a child's place, right?
Hmm.
And for me to bring up something like that today would be a foreign language. It would be just unheard of, because kids today are faster. I want to say smarter, but with technology, and their exposure to so much more. Even with, we didn't have Google and the internet to for instant knowledge about anything and everything. So they have to carry a different level of intellect just
Right.
because of having exposure to it and having it at their fingertips. With that being so, um, there's something missing though. When I was taught yes ma'am, yes sir, I wonder how many households have ever had that conversation with their kids about respect to their elders. Um, but just decency, much less, I put this question up to some of my partners here this last week a few times. How many households have even sat down with their kids as a family and actually talked about the word kindness, who actually had that in a conversation once in their household in the entire life? What is kindness? How can we be more?
Hmm.
You know, I don't think it. I just don't think it's happened in
Mm.
more cases than not, where the word has never been brought up. Much less talked about it as far as implementing it into their lives or at school or at work or something along that lines. Um, and that's got to change.
Hmm.
That's the beginning of everything. How can you be expected to know what you've never learned?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I'd like to ask you a personal question. In your journey with this mission that you have, how do you stay grounded and hopeful? What when you're dealing with so much division, people dealing with traumas and conflict in your line of business?
Well, um, I was trying to remember a quote. I can't remember word for word, but it starts with the saying, "Heavy is the wearer of the crown." and I feel like I've been called and chosen, um, even more so after, you know, um, losing life and coming back, even more so to where I feel, everybody has a purpose for being here. And when I'm in the midst of doing these speaking engagements and or conversations, like I said, I see the light bulb go on. You know, I can really say it doesn't matter if it's just one on one, but to see that door open up that was bolted, that was sealed and cemented and locked, as
Hmm.
far as um, what they believed or what they thought, and now they're questioning it, or open to another perspective. And yeah, that's the revelation. That's what tells me that there's hope. Um, is when I see those glimpses of light and bend cracks in the armor. That's how
Hmm.
that's what keeps me going. And to know that I'm a part of that it means a lot as well.
Mm, okay. By the way, let me ask you a question about that hat. Um, do you ever get any? Is this intentional? Like, stir things up with this hat because I think from a distance people think it might mean something else. So,
Right.
have you ran into any issues wearing that hat? Any
I
negative
have.
responses?
I have. And yes, it's intentional.
Okay,
Um, Make America Great Again, is the
it gets
world
confused.
now, world renowned. And even though they don't see a great on there anywhere, they'll still say it just because of the relation of the color and white letters.
Right.
So to be able to correct them, is a great conversation starter. It also allows me to promote the book as well. But promoting the book and kindness and the mission behind it, absolutely, it is intentional. And even perhaps as people are scrolling by,
Uh-huh.
whatever social media platform that they may see it, they'll see the hat right away, and they probably won't even give it a moment.
Mhm.
Those who have oppositions will probably just make an assumption and just skip right past it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but definitely intentional as a conversation starter.
Okay. And I want to ask you this: if someone were to watch this right now and they were to be thinking, okay, I like what he's talking about, make America kind again. What would you say in their lives would be the first step to do that?
I think the first step is really understanding the magnitude of the word kindness. Um, and you know, you asked me something before about changing people's perspective or getting understanding, and I'll tie both of those into this story. I remember being 17 years old and walking along the street on my way home from school, and I happened to, have this girl who was walking with me down the street. And as she's just a friend, schoolmate. That's it. Matter of fact, I'd never walked with her, even though we live in the same direction. But for whatever reason, we were introduced this time and decided to have a conversation. And while on the way home, we passed this house, and as we're passing, there's a elderly lady came out, a man and woman in their 30s. Apparently, they were married. There's another gentleman came out and a 8-year old, but they came running out screaming with bats, with sticks, with a broom, and just an unbelievable moment. And they were screaming racial slurs and telling me to get away from this girl. And you know, that's one of the moments in my life that, as a reality check, as far as the world we live in, but it just broke my heart to say that somebody doesn't like me because the color of my skin, when if they just gave me a chance, you know, um, they probably would. Um, but out of the turmoil, as silly and crazy as I am, I'm pleading with it just for them to tell me why. What is it? You know, and then the grandmother, um, you know, who was so emotional, pulled herself together to say, three of your kind had molested my granddaughter. And at that moment, I actually could feel and or some empathy. Um, and yes, I could actually find some kindness within myself to these people who were out to hurt me just by understanding why or what their rationale reason was. And so I will never forget that encounter and that moment and what it means just to know that most disagreements, as far as hatreds, whether it be amongst people to nations, how many of those are from misunderstandings, or how many of those could be solved or resolved with understanding if they just were to hear each other out and be willing to compromise.
So is it really just, kindness, putting kindness ahead of every, as a default, ahead of every, you know, uh, divisive conversation, debate, uh, make sure that it's the bedrock of the engagement in conversation because the goal is like you just explained that story. you know you took a moment to, well, why, what is the underlying issues of why you feel that way. If we just react off the reaction and we don't know what is the underlying issue, what you did was deploy kindness to find out, well, why do you feel this way about me, you know because you could ultimately, oh hell, react back, and now
Right,
this gets worse. But what is,
right. We're going to
why?
war.
You
You
please tell
trying to
me
hurt
why you
me?
feel this way, right? All
Yes.
right. And I
I'm
think that's what.
protecting myself. I have every right. This is the key. This is the key.
Mhm,
I have every right to react and respond in
mhm,
kind.
mhm,
But if nobody's the grown up, if they're both kids,
right,
well, he hit me first. Again, back
mm,
to the playground. Well, he hit me second. Well, he called me this name. As
right,
it's a never ending. It's a never ending. So unless someone is willing, because I could just call them crazy. They're crazy, angry, bitter. I'm not trying to hear anything they have to say. This is my enemy, and it's justifiable. That's the key word. It's justifiable. But
mhm,
in reality, just taking that time, and I agree with you 100% as far as being underlined or the root. If
mhm,
kindness, you can change that word kindness to respect. How about that?
mhm,
If kindness is the root of arguments and conversation, if respect was the root of these conversations, they wouldn't be arguments. They would
mhm,
never get that far.
right. So l- I want to thank you for coming here. I want everyone to know, where can we get this book?
Well, I'm signed with Amazon Publishing, so you could go to Amazon and put in my full name, Marcus H. Knight, and all of the books will come up on the platform TikTok. You could also go there as well. And uh, Nightkind is what you look under, KNIGHTKIND, and you look in my profile. There's a direct link. Not to mention seeing some of the amazing AOKs, acts of kindness that I've been honored and privileged to actually do over the last months and years.
And if someone wanted to book you for, some of these workshops and things like that, that we can go to your website, which I can add there at the end of this
Absolutely.
video.
AOK website is available, as well as the AOK Club. So I am going into, I have a book I wrote for elementary school, one for junior high, and another for senior high and college level as well. And there are programs to come in and work with the kids, um, firsthand, as well as the AOK Club, which is an after school program. If some
Hmm.
of the schools would like to start a club to where kids will go and be an example and a blessing to other kids, and or
Hmm.
to some of the faculty, staff, or even within their own community. This is, these things are available. You could also call me directly.
Wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you for coming here and sharing your book with us and the story behind it. I think it's a great um, purchase. I think it's a great, I got my copy in the background. You can't see it, but I actually have my copy. I think it's a great coffee table book as well to have in your home. So your kids, adults, teenagers can have access to it. You guys could talk about some of the issues. I think it's great that you're promoting parents to talk about these issues and encourage for everyone to understand both sides so they can have a well informed conversation. And I want to say Marcus Knight didn't just talk about kindness today. He showed us why it's actually leadership, courage, and
Mm,
it's a real path to healing this country. In a world full of noise, he reminded us that the real impact comes from how we treat each other, and other in
mm,
one way that we always keep kindness as the bedrock to the conversation, not winning the conversation, but coming out in the end where everyone's humanity is protected in the conversation. He's not asking for perfection, he's asking for intention to slow down, to see people, to choose humanity over ego. And that's what your second act is really about when I listen to the work you're doing. It's not just reinvention, but responsibility, and not just success, but significance. So as you move through your day, ask yourself, what's one act of kindness I can choose that shifts the energy around me? That's what I want everyone to ask themselves today. You see what he's doing, but what are
mm,
you doing when it comes to kindness that can shift the energy around you? Because kindness isn't soft, kindness is strategy, kindness is legacy. Marcus, thank you for your work and your heart. And everyone listening today, stay grounded, stay growing, and stay kind. Until next time, second act with DeAngelo.